Now let's try to understand the basics of the option markets. Just like any other derivatives, whether it is forwards or futures or swaps, options are also a kind of an agreement between the buyer and the seller for buying or selling some particular asset at a pre-specified future date and for a price that is agreed upon today. But when I look at a traditional futures contract or a traditional forward or a swap contract, it's a kind of obligation between both A and B to adhere to the contract. If A is a buyer and B is a seller, both A and B have to adhere to the contract, and if any one of them is not adhering, it is treated as a default. Whereas in an option market, one of the parties, either A or B, is having an option to default or not to oblige the contract, to break the contract. But to break the contract, they have taken an option, right? And the other person has given the option. It might very well be possible that A has taken an option to not adhere to the contract, whereas B has provided that option to A. Or it might very well be possible that B has taken the option to back out of the contract, whereas A might have provided that option to B. So, whosoever has taken the option, we call that particular party as the holder of the option or the buyer of the option. Whereas whosoever has given the option to the other party, we call them as the writer of the option or the seller of the option, right? And depending on who has taken the option, buyer of the underlying asset, if that party has taken the option, we call it as the call option. If the seller of the underlying asset, in this case B, if he has taken the option to break the contract, that kind of an option is called as the put option, right? So this is where the option as a financial instrument becomes much more powerful, because there is a benefit for one party to typically break the contract, not adhere to the contract. That particular party has taken the option to break the contract at their own convenience, right? So in a traditional sense, let's say the buyer of some X, A is a buyer of X, seller B is a seller of good X. Now if A has taken the option, we call it as a call option. So A has bought the call option, B has sold the call option to A. But if B has taken the option, we call it as a put option, saying B has bought the put option, A has sold the put option to B. And many a times these options are very short term in nature, 3 months, 1 month, but a few of them can go even for years as well. So we need to be comfortable with the word call or put, and the price at which the buying or selling happens at a future date, here we call that as the exercise price, or traditionally we also call it as the strike price, the price at which the typical buying or selling happens. So whenever I talk about the word call option, it is whosoever has taken that option, that particular party will get the right or the option but not the obligation to buy X at a future date for the strike price. If he wants to buy, he'll buy, otherwise he can very well break the same. Whereas when I'm talking about the put option, whosoever has taken the put option, this particular party will have the right but not the obligation to sell the good at the future maturity date at the exercise price. If he wants to sell, he can sell it. Otherwise, he can very well sell it into the market. He need not sell to A because he has taken the option. Now, whosoever has taken the option, that party on the day of the contract will make a payment called as the premium to the other party. In case of a call option, A will make a premium payment to B. In case of a put option, B may make a premium payment to A. So this could traditionally happen. Whosoever has taken the option, he is going to pay some lump sum amount to the other party for giving the option to break the contract in the future. So this premium is paid on the date of the agreement. This is one more difference between the options and others. In the other derivatives, there is nothing that is paid from one party to the other party on the day of agreement of the contract. Whereas in case of option, whosoever is taking the option to break the contract, that party is making a premium payment to the other party to enable it to exercise the option whenever it wants. Right? So typically it's like, let's say A has taken a call option. Right? So A might have paid some premium to B. And when so because now A has taken an option, there are two routes for A. Either it exercise the option or it expire the option. Now if it exercises it, then in the future it has to buy the good X at the strike price. So the overall cost for A for that good X is not just the strike price plus even the premium as well. So overall this much of amount is being paid for purchasing this good X in an option contract. Whereas if it is expiring that particular option, irrespective of that, on the day on the day of agreement, the premium is already paid. If it is expiring, it does not pay anything, which means still the cost per year remains to be the premium that it has paid, which is not a refundable kind of stuff. So this is the loss that A would be bearing in this case, but the loss cannot go below this because whenever things are not favorable, A can very well back out of the contract. Maximum it can lose only the premium that it has paid. Right? So whosoever in this example, now B is the writer of the call option. Now B at the outset is going to receive the premium from A, and by receiving the premium he gets into an obligation. If A wants to exercise this option, there is no other go for B except selling that good. If A wants to expire the option, B has to sell it in the market itself. So this is where the writer is getting a compensation of the premium but does not have any kind of an option, whereas the buyer is getting an option or a right at a future date without any kind of an obligation to buy or sell something. So it's which means in a way there are four major transactions that are going to come up: buy a call option, buy a put option, sell a call, sell a put. And if I have to put it in a much better, a grid kind of a manner, okay, if I'm talking about the buyer, seller, call, put. So buyer of a call will have an option to buy the underlying asset at future date and the pre-specified price. Whereas if the buyer wants to buy it, the seller of the call is mandatory or obligated to sell the good to A for whatever the price, the A for the exercise price, for the strike price. Similarly, when I am talking about a buyer of a put option, it's an option for that party to sell the underlying asset at a future date for the strike price. And if the buyer wants to sell the underlying asset, the seller does not, the seller of the option does not have any other go. It's mandatory for him to buy from A for the exercise price. And because of that, in both the cases, the buyer will be making the premium payment to the seller, and the seller of the option or the writer of the option, he is going to receive the premium payment from the party. Now, a few things to look at: the right versus the obligation. So whenever we are buying an option, on the day of entering into the contract, there is a cash outflow. But whenever we are selling an option, whether it is a call option or a put option, whenever we are selling or writing an option, there is a cash inflow on the day of entering into an agreement. So the cash flows will not be the same for all these four. There is a difference that exists in all four of them. So you can't say that selling a call is same as buying a put, or buying a put or probably buying a call is not the same as selling the put, because on the initial day there is a cash outflow in any buying operation and cash inflow in every selling operation. Now this is where the option really is quite heavily different from that of the traditional futures contract, right? Because in futures there is no option, both the parties have an obligation only, whereas in option one party has a right but not the obligation. And on the day of entering into an agreement, the buyer of the option is making an explicit payment to the seller of the option. Whereas in case of futures, no such payment happens. It's only the deposit that happens with the exchange. The cash between the buyer and the seller does not get explicitly exchanged on the day of entering into the contract, right? So this is what differentiates a futures contract from a traditional options contract. And just to talk a little bit more, even majority a good number of options are traded on well organized exchanges itself, and all the characteristics of the exchange which we discussed with respect to the futures, they are applicable to the options as well. So there could be an open outcry as well as an electronic trading process. There could be a clearing house which will act as the counterparty to every trade, taking care of the guaranteeing part. So there could be a margin deposits which even the exchange may ask in this case. But here the difference is the buyer of the option need not pay any kind of a margin. Why so? Because the buyer has made all the necessary premium payment to the seller of the option, and there is no other scope of default from the buyer, because he has an option. Whenever he wants to back out, he can back out. So there is nothing which is creating the risk from the buyer's standpoint. So buyer default is a part of the contract. The buyer of the option default is a part of the contract itself, which means there is no credit risk associated with this. Buyer defaulting is not treated as a credit risk. It's a feature of the contract itself, which means there is no need to take a margin deposit from the buyer, right? So only the seller would be depositing a margin, whereas in case of a futures, we see both of them have to deposit the margin with the clearing house, right? But the other traditional role of the exchange will still continue to be the same. So from the buyer's position, because there is no obligation, there is no need of any kind of a margin from the buyer's perspective. So there is nothing called buyer facing a loss beyond the premium that they have typically paid. So there is nothing, any kind of a default risk to the clearing house. So that's the reason there is no need of any kind of margin deposit from the perspective of the buyers. And even from the operations perspective, what we see is just like the futures, majority of the option positions are also closed out before the maturity itself, which means majority of them result in a cash settlement without any need for the physical delivery of the underlying. And the entire margin process for the sellers is more or less similar to the margin process that goes as a part of the futures contract only. So just having a good understanding of the options contract, and the options as such are very tricky instruments because of their asymmetric payoffs that they typically bring in. One party cannot lose more than the buyer of the option cannot lose beyond a certain amount, which is the premium, whereas the seller of the option cannot gain anything beyond above the premium that he is collecting. So because of this, a very intensive understanding of the future movements is very much essential to succeed in the typical option contracts. But this session is just an initial overview to give you a decent flavor into the understanding of the option products and contracts, right?